Hello, I'm Dennis Tucker, and this is Book, Chapter, and Verse. I appreciate you turning on the program, watching us this week. I hope you open your Bible study along with us. Let me also tell you that we are brought to you by the Westside Church of Christ. Westside Church of Christ is located, the building is located at 4201 Bent Tree Drive, Owensboro, Kentucky, 42301. And we are devoted to studying the Bible, to looking and being simply the church of the New Testament. Well, often we say we are Christians and only Christians. What we mean by that is that we have no creed except for the Bible. We have no head except for Christ. We are not a part of some bigger organization, or earthly organization. We're not a denomination. We're simply New Testament Christians. And so we hope you'll be willing to come and maybe study with us and look at the Bible, see if what we're teaching is what the Bible says or not. And if we're not teaching the truth, then you be my friend. When you come visit with us to point out the error of our ways, we'd be obligated to change in order to do what the Bible says. But also the obligation goes both ways. And that is, if you find what the Bible says is something that you're not doing, then you have the obligation, not to me, but to God, to actually do what the Bible says. And so we hope you come be with us at the Westside Church of Christ. We want to get into an area that some people may say is kind of like meddling. I remember a number of years ago, I was preaching down in Florida, and we had a brother in Christ down there that sometimes we have business meetings and discuss the work of the church, and he would talk about certain areas we get into, and he said, well, you're getting into meddling now. You're getting into beyond preaching into meddling. And I think this is one of those areas, a lot of people would say, well, this kind of one of those areas you have to tread lightly on because some would see this as meddling. And what we're going to talk about is being a successful parent or successful parenting. When I grew up, well, every child grows up in a home, and they think that all the other homes really functions like that. When I grew up, my parents worked factory work. We got up generally about 5:30 in the mornings. They would, get us ready. We go to our grandparents, and then they go to work. We go to school. They got off work about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I come home, and we would have supper, and we called it supper, by the way. We would have supper at about 4 o'clock every day. And so we learned to go to bed early because we got up early. We learned to eat early because they got home early. And I remember one time my mom mentioned the fact that a lot of parents or a lot of families don't eat that early, that this is pretty early in the afternoon to actually be eating. And I thought about that, and that just kind of stuck with me because I thought, you mean people eat late? I mean, she was talking about 5, 6, or 7 o'clock before some families eat. And I thought about that in the sense of how do they do that? Isn't that awful strange? They get off for hungry before they have supper. But I found out later on that she was right. A lot of families eat later than 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But that was my baseline. That's the way I kind of grew up. And then as you grow up, and as you start having your own families, you kind of start from where your parents have brought you up, from that point of viewpoint, I guess I'm talking about. And then you kind of adapt. You change for maybe how your spouse, how they grew up, but also of your work schedule, of what you're used to, what you adapt to. And so you start developing your own routine, your own parenting style. And that's very important because as your children grow up, you have the responsibility to be the parent. And as you look at that 5-year-old child, you have to learn how can I communicate? How can I get across what that child needs to know at 5 years old versus when they're 15 years old? How do I communicate that child once they become a teenager? And honestly, you cannot communicate with them the same way. You don't talk to a 5-year-old like they're 15, and you can't talk to a 15 like they're 5 years old. You have to learn how to be age appropriate, and so as to get across your idea to them. And as you do this, as you bring up children, you start thinking about what is your goal? What is your mission as a parent? Is it simply to get them out of the house? Is it simply to keep them from tearing up the furniture, for killing each other, for killing somebody else? And that you just count the days until finally they turn 18 and you tell them, there's the front door, go on out that way. Is that your idea of being a parent? Or is there something more involved in parenting than simply see them grow up and walk out the door? And so that's very important. I think we need to think about what is my goal in child rearing. And as to do that, I came across, look at the Bible. We find that basically that as you talk about child rearing, you're talking about molding a way the child thinks and behaves. And those two are really linked in together. Now, when a child is young, you may concentrate a lot of times on the behavior. And you may not spend a lot of time trying to explain to that child why you want them to do this. You simply tell them what you want them to do. You may tell them, why don't you pick up your room? Or you may tell them, I want you to turn off the television. But as a child grows up, you start realizing that really what you have to concentrate on is the way the child thinks, to mold the way the child thinks. Because once you do that, then you change the way the child behaves. That thinking leads to behavior. The Bible talks about the heart of a person. And when it talks about the heart, it's talking about the way a person thinks, the emotions, the will of the person. And when a person's heart is determined to do something, then that changes or affects the way they behave. And we see that in numerous passages in the Bible. I want to turn your attention to the passage out of Exodus. It's Exodus 35th chapter. This deals with the children of Israel as they had been brought out of Egypt. Now they were in the wilderness, and it was time to make the tabernacle. And so in making the tabernacle, they received instructions as far as bringing what they had to the craftsmen so they could make the tabernacle and all the furnishings that God had told them to make. And in Exodus 35th chapter, around verse 21, it said, then everyone came whose heart was stirred, and everyone whose spirit was willing, and they brought the Lord's offering for the work of the tabernacle of meeting, for all the service, for the holy garments. Now notice there it talks about the heart of the people being stirred. It talks about them doing this willingly, freely doing this. And in fact, the response to the charge to bring what they had so they can make this tabernacle was so good that as you go down around verse 29, it said, the children of Israel brought a free will offering to the Lord. All the men and women whose hearts were willing to bring material for all kinds of work which the Lord by the hand of Moses had commanded be done. Now because the heart was stirred, because they had a willing heart, you see, they did exactly what God said. In fact, as you look at this passage, they got to the point where Moses and the craftsmen had to say, stop, we have enough. Don't bring any more, we already have plenty. But what would have happened if the heart had not been stirred? What would have happened if God had said, okay, now do this, but instead, they kind of looked and thought, do we have to? You can imagine, okay, how many pleads when Moses had to bring to the children to bring this free will offering to the tabernacle so they could make the tabernacle? Would they have had to have telethon? Would they have had to have fundraisers? Would they have had to have bake sales? No, what they did was their heart was willing, and therefore everything else happened because of the willing heart. And so what we need to concentrate on with our children is the heart of the child, the attitude, the thinking process of the child. We have another passage over in Ezra, here in the Old Testament, in Ezra, as he goes to rebuild the temple of Jerusalem after it had been destroyed during the captivity. And in Ezra, the 7th chapter, and around verse 10, it said, for Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach the statutes and ordinances in Israel. Ezra had a willing heart. He set his heart to do the will of God. And so we look at a child, we have to realize that a child, we need to be involved in molding the way the child thinks. And that's what the Bible says to us in numerous passages. Over in Proverbs 22, verse 6. Let me just turn my Bible here to Proverbs 22nd chapter, verse 6. And notice I'm in 21st chapter here. And verse 6, it says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And so you train up a child in the way they go, to teach that child how to behave. And children really need that. They really need to know how to behave, what's expected of them. Have you ever been in a situation, maybe a social situation, where you get invited to a fancy dinner or a a group of people, and you know, you're just out of your element. Maybe, like I said before, it's a fancy dinner you have. As my children one time remarked, when we had gone to a restaurant, they knew it was a good restaurant because the napkins were cloth and they weren't paper napkins. Well, you go to a fancy dinner, maybe they have the cloth napkins, and you have more than one fork. There's numerous forks there, and there's maybe also different spoons there, and you have different glasses there, and you're trying to figure out, now, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? And most of us, that is not really a comfortable situation to wonder what's the appropriate thing to do, what's the appropriate thing to say in this group, in this social setting. And so we like to be comfortable. We like to know what is expected of us. Children are the same way. Children need to know, what is it that mom and dad really expects me to do? What is expected of us? And studies have been done to determine what makes children happy. And when they look at happy children versus unhappy children, they found certain qualities, certain styles of training in the home that tend to correlate to happiness and unhappiness. And children that know, for instance, where to sit at the dinner table. They know because they suspected that this is their place to sit, and that's their siblings' place to sit. Children that know what time they're supposed to be going to bed, what time to get a bath. They know what their parents expect of them, that they really are happier. Now, they may sometimes complain about, do I have to get a bath, or do I have to pick up my room? But when they know what to do, it is actually a comfort to them. And so, as far as child raising is concerned, they need to know the rules. And so, as a parent, I need to think about, now, what is then my mission as a parent? Sometimes companies have mission statements. In fact, a lot of times you go to maybe a health clinic or to a business, and you may find someplace on the wall a mission statement. And what the mission statement really is the company trying to define why they are there, what they're trying to do. If it's a service company, like let's say a health clinic, their mission statement may say that we are here to provide the best affordable medical treatment that our patients need. Okay, very general mission statement. And then, based on the mission statement, they try to behave a certain way. So that's the idea of the mission statement. And I got thinking about this as far as a parent. What would be my mission statement? Think about that for a minute if you're a parent. What is your mission statement? And as I got thinking about that more, I kind of wrote down this. That is, to mold the way our children think and behave, to instill within them a heart to discern both good and evil. Okay, very simple but very important mission statement there. That is what I'm trying to do. That should be my goal of being a parent. Now you may say, now, why is that really important? You may notice that when a company has problems and they change CEOs, Chief Executive Officers, that among the things that Chief Executive Officer does to start with is that he usually comes up with a mission statement. And then they make sure that mission statement is taught to everybody below him. The officers right below him learn the mission statement. The people below them learn the mission statement. It goes all the way down through the corporation to finally the person working either on an assembly line or the person working at the local franchise. Here's their mission statement. Because again, it is supposed to say, based on this is what we're going to do. And if I don't know what it is I'm trying to do, I won't know what to do. So as a parent, I need to know, as far as what is my mission, to mold the way my child thinks and behaves, and to instill with them a heart to discern good and evil. Now, honestly, the question comes up, well, how do I do that? And that's a good question. And so let's notice the things the Bible points out to us. One is that a parent's going to do this by instruction. In Ephesians, the 6th chapter, and verse 4, Ephesians 6, verse 4 says, "You fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." Now, in that training process, you have to realize, as a parent, that your time is very limited. We look at our children and we think, I remember when we brought our first child home, our son, And on the way home, I got to thinking, 18 years. I mean, this is just a little baby, 18 years of bringing up that child. And at that time, it seemed like a long time. Now, first of all, I'll tell you, the 18 years has passed very quickly. He's now 21, and where those 18 years went to, I don't know. Okay, very quickly, 18 years passed by. But the second thing we have to realize is that we really don't have 18 years. Our time of bringing up our children is very limited to the first few years, in fact, of molding the way a child thinks and behaves. I want to read you something I came across. It's called All I Ever Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And it's by Robert Fulghum. Okay, I want to give credit where credit's due. And so here he starts off saying, most of what I really needed to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but here in the sandbox at nursery school. These are things I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the plastic cup? The roots go down and the plant goes up, and nobody really knows how or why, but we are all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice, and even the little seed in the plastic cup, they all die. So do we. And then remember the book about Dick and Jane, and the first word you learned, the biggest word of all, look. Everything you need to know is in there somewhere. The golden rule and love and basic sanitation. Ecology and politics and sane living. Think of what a better world would be if we all, the whole world, had cookies and milk about 3 o'clock every afternoon and then lay down with our blankets for a nap. Or we had a basic policy in our nation and other nations to always put things back where we found them and clean up our own messes. And it's still true, no matter how old you are. When you go out into the world, it's best to hold hands and stick together. Now, I like that. It's a little bit humorous, but it has a lot of really good lessons there. And the point of it is that these are rules, are principles children learn in kindergarten. And those principles apply to the rest of their lives. Our children learn very early. And really their behavior and their way of thinking is molded very early. Dr. Dobson is well known for a number of books he's written and lectures he's given on child rearing in the home. And one occasion he was going through this process of disciplining your child, to bring up a child and nurture and admonition of the Lord. And a mother stood up and said she wanted to know when she should start with her child. And he asked her, said, how old is your child? And she said, 3 years old. And he told her, he said, lady, immediately leave this place and go home and start right now, because you've already lost the 3 most important years in your child's life as far as disciplining that child. You see, it starts very early. And so it's too late. After they get to be 10 or 11 years of age, to think, I don't know now, training my child to nurture and the Lord, and it's too late. And so realize, as far as the instruction, your time element. The second thing is, do not excuse your reluctance to discipline your children. Do not give excuses so not to discipline your children. Maybe that's the best way to say about it. Because, and when I talk about discipline here, let me define it a little bit. Because some people think discipline means spanking. That may be a part of the process later on. But discipline involves instruction, involves training. The root word, and it's very easy to see, a discipline is the word disciple. And it means to be a student of, to be learning from. And so as parents, we are to teach our children. Now, some parents never get around to discipline their children, never get around to teaching their children. And part of the reason is because it can be hard work. It can be very time consuming. It can try your patience. And we hear sometimes parents that talk about their children and there's excuses. Well, my child, they're in the terrible twos. Yeah, they're in terrible twos. I'll wait later on. And then the terrible twos, they're followed by the troublesome threes. And they're a little bit later on, but right now they're in troublesome threes. And then you have the feisty fours. And that's followed then by the fussy fives. And then the sassy sixes. And the stubborn sevens. And maybe you just can go on up the list there. The exasperating eights. And the naughty nines. Just go on and on. And finally you turn around and you realize your child's a teenager. And now they're an adult and it's too late to try to do anything with them. You remember Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies? Some of you are old enough to remember when that program's on live. I am. I mean, the first runs of that program. Some of the others may have been watching reruns. But Jed Clampett, Jethro Bodine was actually, I guess, his nephew, but Jethro Bodine had the intelligence of a fence post. I mean, let's face it, the guy did not have all the oars in the water. And Jethro Bodine sometimes would say something, and Jed Clampett would look at him and just say, one of these days, I'm going to have a good talk with that boy. Did you ever see him ever have that good talk with the boy? I never did. It just never happened. And you have to realize, when you put it off to one of these days, that's the same thing as saying, I'm never going to do it. And so as a parent, your job is to be involved in the discipline of your children. And again, I'm talking about the instruction and training of your children. My wife homeschooled our children for a number of years. And I remember many years ago when she was doing that, of parents that would come up to her and say, I could never do that. I don't know how you're doing that. How can you teach your own child? I can never teach my own child. Think about that for a minute. You can't communicate with your own child. You can't have patience with your own child. You can't get across points to your own child. There's something wrong there, either with you or the child or both. But it's your job to be able to discipline, to instruct your child. And don't use cop-outs. And don't try to just cop-out, because your job is to learn how to do this. And so that's one thing, instruction and discipline. The second thing I want to say is time. Now, I already brought out the fact that time is limited. But what I mean here is that time is needed to actually discipline your children. And there's not a microwave way to do this. We're used to microwaves. We put something in the microwave, push one button, and maybe within 30 seconds or 2 minutes, it's done. It used to take a long time to cook something. Now we could cook it really quickly. Our children are not like that. You can't microwave them. And so that means it takes time. And families are often crunched for time. I got thinking about this and kind of broke it down like this. The typical day for probably the typical family, and I know I'm being very general with this, but stay with me. The typical day, I would dare say, that a child spends about 7 hours in school. Okay, 7 hours. 7 hours afterwards, either watching television, playing games, or playing computer games, and maybe doing homework. And so that's 14 hours right there. Now you have 8 hours for sleeping. That gets you up to 22 hours. And then 2 hours may be spent with a babysitter or with somebody else. And so that's 24 hours. That's the whole day. I remember a number of years ago reading that the average father spent less than 7 minutes a day talking to his children. The average dad spent less than 7 minutes a day talking to his children. You can't have a conversation in 7 minutes. You can't actually communicate with your child or children in 7 minutes. And so we need to spend time together as a family. We need to make sure we give our children some of our time. And one of the things, phrases that was kind of like the catchphrase back in the 80s and 90s was, well, quality time. We spend quality time together. And what do they mean by that? Well, we may not spend a whole lot of time, but it's really quality time we're spending together. Folks, quality time and quantity time are together. You just can't have 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 7 minutes of quality time. You can't go into your child's room and say, I've managed to work in right now, and we're going to have 5 minutes of really good quality time. It's got to be quality time to get that quality time. Now, when I was growing up, my interest was really in sports. I watched, if there was football on television, and fortunately, when I was growing up, we didn't have ESPN. We didn't have 24-hour sports on television. The games were a lot more limited. But if there was a game on, I watched it. I watched all the football games I could watch, all the basketball games, all the baseball games. If there was a sport on, I was watching it. And I like playing some of those sports. My dad was not a sports person. He didn't like watching football or basketball or baseball. Every now and then he would go out and throw some ball with me, baseball with me, but that was about it. Now that would be a recipe for disaster normally, because there would seem to be nothing in common between my dad and I. But what my dad liked to do was he liked to farm. And so we lived in Louisville, and every weekend on Friday afternoon we loaded up the car and went down to the farm. We had to travel 2 hours together to get down there. Once we got down to the farm, we had work to do. Every Saturday, if it was during time of the fall, we would go out as a family, cut firewood, and we would be together the whole day working. If it was in spring, it may be all day in the garden. It would be mowing the yard. It would be taking care of cattle. It would be putting up a fence. But it was always things we were doing together. And you know, when we were out there working together, we talked. And you just can't help but eventually start talking to each other. And that was, I think, my dad's way of communicating with us. We learned each other. I learned who my dad was. And I think my dad learned who I was. Those days working together. Now, if you're like me, you probably don't have 40 acres or 100 acres to go farm every weekend. But the task we have is spend time with our children. If it's going to a ball game, you spend time with your child at that ball game. You talk with your child on the way to the game and on the way back and at the game also. So make sure you spend time with your children in order to have that quality time together, because really they go together. And that time allows us to do some things also. It allows us to provide the right example to our children. Over in the book of Exodus 18th chapter is talking here about Abraham. And a lot of times when we think about Abraham, the one event that really stands out was when Abraham offered Isaac on the altar. And that is a great act of faith. I don't want to downplay that a bit. However, one passage here in Genesis 18th chapter always stood out in my mind, also says a lot about Abraham. And in Genesis 18th chapter, verse 19, this is what God says about Abraham. He says, "For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him." Do you see in that passage that God said, "I know him that he will command his children and his household after him"? That's a great compliment to give somebody. That he knew that his children would follow after Abraham, that Abraham's children would follow after him. And so we need to give our children time. We need to provide the example. We need to talk with them. We need to let them know that their day was important to us. And so there's times, let the dishes go. Let the sink be dirt full of dirty dishes. There's time, let the clothes go. You know, let the laundry wait till tomorrow. There's times, turn off the television. Hang up the phone. And simply be a hands-on parent. I remember when we lived in Florida, had our first child. I don't know how long it was that our child was home with us. But one day, Regina came in. I was sitting down. Regina came in. She handed me our child, our son, and said, "Here, he's yours too." And that was a case of really starting to become a parent to me, because that was, okay, I've got to do something with this child. Parenting is a hands-on experience. It requires personal involvement. In Luke 10th chapter, verses 41 and 42, deals with Mary and Martha. Jesus was at the house of these two ladies, and Mary was listening to Jesus teaching, and Martha was all busy doing household chores, getting food ready for the people. And she was upset because Mary wasn't helping her. So in Luke 10, verse 41, Actually, verse 40, Martha comes to Jesus and says, you command my sister to help me. And what she got was kind of surprise to her, and that Jesus really rebukes her. In verse 41, he said, Martha, Martha, you're worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed. And Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her. What was Jesus saying? Mary's priorities were right. Martha's was wrong. It wasn't the fact that Martha was a bad person, but her priorities were messed up. She could fix food later on. This was her opportunity to hear Jesus teach. My point is that our priorities must stay straight with our children. We must remember that they need to be important to us, enough to us to spend time with them. Lee Atwater was a man that made his career handling political campaigns. He helped Bush 41 become president. He may have helped Ronald Reagan in his presidential campaign also. And Lee Atwater was a man that was known somewhat for kind of dirty politics. He was rough in his campaigns. And he, latter years of life, had brain cancer. The last interview I saw of him, he talked about things he regretted, and he acknowledged that some of the campaigns he probably went across the line, said things he should not have said, and really was kind of dirty politics. But when they asked him, what was your biggest regret in life? Lee Atwater's response was, his biggest regret in life was not spending more time with his family. Think about that for a second. It wasn't not spending enough time in the office. It was spending more time. It was not spending enough time with his family. I've never known a person yet that, as they lay in their bed dying, regretted not spending more time in the office. It always is. They wish they had done more things with those they love. Vaughn was a man. He was a successful businessman, a contractor, builder. He became president of the Association of General Contractors in his area. He was involved in a number of civic activities and local boards. One night, he came home. His children were laughing and playing with their mom. And he opened the door of the bedroom, and his 3-year-old girl looks up and says, who's that? And the mom said, well, that's your daddy. And the little girl said, I don't have a daddy. Vaughn said at that point, at that instant, he knew he had to change his life. He had to get his priorities different. We need to make sure our children are important to us. And a lot of the problems we have today are conveniences, our time savers. We have telephones and TVs, and we have a television in every room almost. I remember one guy went one place to a lectureship, and they were giving away free gifts. One of the free gifts, I had a little raffle for it, but was for a television. And the guy said, if I win the TV, I'm going to give it right back. He said, because I've got television in every room in my house. He didn't have any more place to put the TV. I got thinking about that. We don't have quite one in every room in our house, but we have a lot of them. When I grew up, we had one TV. We had 3 channels. Today we have multiple TVs, and we have so many channels we can't even count them. What am I saying? I'm saying is these things tear us away from our loved ones, that they can fill our time to the point we don't spend time with our families. We need to make sure that we spend some time with our families. Go into a child's room, ask them questions. What are you watching? What happened today? And just talk to them. Okay, that's part of the instruction, part of the discipline. Another thing is make sure your children know that you love them. Over in Titus, 2nd chapter, verse 4. Titus 2, verse 4. Titus, the 2nd chapter, and verse 4. Instruction with the older women, teaching the young women, is so that they admonish young women to love their husbands, to love their children. Now, this love's not always easy. Now, love here involves nurturing, it means providing what's necessary, it means providing what's good for their health and strength. And a child needs food, they need clothing, but they also need affection. What happens if you take a normal child and you put it in a room by itself and you feed it, but you never talk to it, you never handle it, you never do anything with it? What happens? Every now and then, some tragedy like that happens, and they find this child that maybe the mom and dad just hid away. Didn't want anybody to know they had this child. They put it in a room, and what happens is that child never forms properly. mentally, physically, emotionally, is never right. It is always harmed by that. And our children need to know that we love them. Spend time talking to your child. Spend some time hugging them. Let them know that your home is a place where they can come to for safety. When we leave our homes, when our children leave their homes and they go to school, they hear all kinds of language. They see all kinds of things happening. And we can't control all that, but the one thing we can do is control our home environment. We let our children know when they come to that house that this is a safe environment for them. This is a place where they are loved. And sometimes children need to be hugged. Now, usually not. I'll tell you the truth. If you have teenagers, they don't want you hugging them out in public. They don't want you necessarily being around them in public, but at home, they want you to do those things. And so let your children know that they are loved. Provide the right example. Now, somebody may say, well, what about a rebellious child? What about a child that just, you try to teach that child, you try to do what's right with that child, and they are always pressing my buttons. They're always trying to get on my nerves. They're always trying to rebel against me. What about that child? Now, why not say you have to take as age appropriate, okay? Again, you don't treat a 5-year-old like you do a 15-year-old. But I want to look at the 15th chapter. We are told here about what's called the prodigal son. A man had 2 sons, and one of the sons comes to him. And in verse 11, there says, a certain man had 2 sons. The younger one then said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. And so he divided them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. Now, first of all, I have to notice here, as a home is more than one child. Okay, there's more than one child in this home, and he could not let the one child ruin the other child. All right, you cannot sacrifice, if you have 2 or 3 children, you cannot sacrifice 2 or 3 children just for one. But second thing is that this father, and this man obviously is a young man, grown up by now, could go out on his own. Dad had to let him go. And he had to let him go and suffer the consequences of his actions. Now, as parents, we have to let our children know that when they do things that are bad, there will be consequences, and they want to suffer those consequences. We will not get them out of every situation they get themselves into. And once a child learns that, it becomes a little bit more real to them. I remember our oldest son, I mentioned a number of times, his name's Eli. A very disciplined young man, as far as self-discipline. Very good. Obeyed what we said to do most of the time. One time, my wife was substitute teaching in his class, and the teacher had told the class earlier that if anybody misbehaved, then Miss Tucker was going to write their name on the board, and the next day that child's going to get a spanking. Okay? Going to get disciplined. Well, during the day, my wife said that the class had gone to another room, and she was actually just doing some busy work. And she looked out the hallway, and there my son was, and he was jumping over another child. They were horseplaying. And said she saw him, and the second he realized she saw him, said his face just dropped. And she said it really hurt her to have to do this, but she had to write his name on the board. And that day as she walked home, she said she was crying and he was crying, and he stayed out there in the swing set in the backyard, and he was just, it was a Friday of all things, and it wouldn't be until Monday that he would actually suffer the consequences, and all weekend it was just torture. Now, it would have been easy to have gone and just erased the name and said, it's okay, I'll get, don't worry about it. But he had to learn there were consequences to his actions. Now, as it turned out, the teacher just erased the name, actually didn't give anybody a spanking, but he had to learn that we were not going to get him out of every bad situation he got himself into. As a parent, our children have to learn that mom and dad will not protect me in every situation. I've got to suffer the consequences of my action. And then finally, as this young man realizes, I'm talking about here in Luke 15, when the young man realized that he was wrong and wanted to go back to his father. And in verse 15, he said, when he came to himself, and he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will rise and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and earth before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he rose and came to his father, but when he was still a great way off, his father saw him, had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. This is an important point here. As parents, when our children mess up, and when they turn and say, I'm sorry, you forgive that child and you let that child know you love them. You may have messed up, but I still love you. No matter what, I love you. Again, our children need to know that. And so these are some of the things as far as parenting would be useful, helpful in our parenting. And I hope this has been helpful to you. I know this is not necessarily a lesson about talking about how one becomes a Christian or about the church of Christ established or about other things out of the Bible, but it's important because it relates to our families and about being successful parents. I appreciate you watching. And I would like to invite you to come be with us at the Westside Church of Christ. Our building is located at 4201 Bent Tree Drive, Owensboro, Kentucky, 42301. On Sunday mornings, we have Bible classes at 9:30, 10:30 a time of worship, 6 p.m. worship services. Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock, we have Bible classes again. And if you would like to contact me, you can call me at 683-4204, or you can email me at wcoc@bellsouth.net, and I'll be glad to talk to you or to correspond with you. Our desire is simply to do what the Bible says. I appreciate you watching Book, Chapter, and Verse. I hope you tune in next week for another edition of this program.